Nymph is good, and you should pull her.
我们一生注定是沧桑，苦之来。
Nymph as a caster fills plenty of roles that makes her special and pretty universal. Primal casters are a new caster trait that specializes in attacking enemies under elemental status to deal additional damage. Let me clarify this first. Circle going anti-clockwise means applying elemental status, and circle going clockwise means that the enemy is under elemental damage / effect. So when I say the enemy is taking elemental damage or is under the effect of Necrosis, that means the circle is like this, not this. And when I say applying Necrosis, it means this and not this. Are we clear? One flaw that primal casters do have is that not a lot of their skills can inflict the effect on their own, making them very reliant on ritualists, or any other source that can inflict elemental status. But preferably, you'd want people that can apply it consistently. But not Nymph. She can actually apply elemental status. I will get to that soon. Nymph introduces two new mechanics, the ability to inflict fear, and making players not pick Wizardell to explode everything and actually build a team comp. The easiest way to explain the fear mechanic is this. Fear causes enemies to distort their pathing by actively running away from the fear source, which in this case is this thing. When the enemy is feared, it causes them to ignore block counts and pathing. This can lead to instances where she could scare things to paths where you don't want them to be. That would be bad. Nymph only has two skills that can actually inflict Necrosis. But it still inflicts Necrosis, so take it as you will.
2 5s don't equal a 10. Quick math, don't try it again.
Her talent 1 is the talent that makes her an absolute powerhouse. She causes enemies to take 40% of her attack stat as elemental damage per second, lasting until the Necrosis status ends. Keep in mind that she is dealing elemental damage here, meaning that this damage bypasses any type of defense stat and art resist stat. Elemental damage, guys. It may as well be true damage. This is obviously good in a lot of situations when the enemy is under the Necrosis effect, since the enemy will take Necrosis elemental damage and her damage, but obviously, again, this requires enemies to be under the Necrosis effect. A few good options to apply this are, first, Virtuosa. Obviously, Virtuosa skill 1 applies this effect very efficiently. Her skill 1 does 300% attack as arts damage and applying an additional 110% attack as Necrosis damage. And it's AoE, also assisted by her talent. Her skill 3 is also obviously busted for applying Necrosis. Logos can also be good, but it's just slower than Virtuosa, so just use Virtuosa. Her talent 2 can increase her attack by 20%. This attack bonus isn't the easiest to build up, but once it does build up, you'll know, because her little pouch here will start to do "You are my sunshine." This buff isn't really a necessary buff that you should proc, because it can be pretty difficult to pull off without a careful setup, since it only stacks when the enemy inside her range triggers the Necrosis effect. You may think it's not that bad until you realize her range is, in my opinion, I think it's just a nice bonus if you do manage to pull it off.
I'm a stone-faced killer like my motherfucking house is.
Heart Scourge is Nymph's first skill, increasing her attack by 110%. Has the ability to inflict 15% of art damage as Necrosis damage. If the target is already under the Necrosis effect, she will do 50% of attack more damage as elemental damage. And yes, this bonus damage effect counts as elemental damage, bypassing defense and art resist. Though it does require the enemy being under the Necrosis effect already. and by the time she actually put an enemy under the Necrosis effect by herself, the enemy was probably dead from getting hit 12 times before being under Necrosis, whilst this skill is active. Not only that, this skill is only active for 20 seconds on a 30-second cooldown, and it is also single target, which is fine in some cases. This skill as an ability is fine, it's not bad, but it's just a fine buff skill for 20 seconds. In my opinion, it's overshadowed by her other skills. There isn't a lot that I can say about this skill, since it's just a simple damaging skill that can apply Necrosis and do elemental damage. D tier. Blast of Fear will be Nymph's skill 2. This skill shoots out an AoE attack similar to W Alter, a direct hit, and a delayed explosion, both dealing 400% attack as arch damage, inflicting fear upon the enemy for 5 seconds. And again, it also inflicts 25% of arch damage as additional Necrosis damage. If the target is under the effect of Necrosis, her talent 1 damage is increased to 100%. This skill also stores 2 charges. This skill is really powerful. She shoots in AoE, and as we all know, AoE is always important majority of the time. Not only this, she inflicts fear on the main target that she hits, and does not inflict fear on any other enemy hit by her AoE. Which is fine. I feel like if everything in the AoE was inflicted fear, it would be way too powerful. This fear mechanic, as I've explained 5 minutes ago, makes enemies walk away from the fear source. But to go in detail, her fear will set a new checkpoint node on a tile that diverges away from her, basically making this destination the new blue box for the enemy. After this expires, in 5 seconds, their goal node will return to the original blue box. Now, you might be thinking that you can scare something into somewhere you want them to be, like holes. Absolutely f***ing not. Now, the reason why this happens is that it sets a new destination, which gives the enemy a new path to take to that destination. So sadly, no, pushes are still going to be used. Fear as a mechanic is really good for starting stages, since fear can pretty much stall in a lot of situations. And it's not like you have to wait long, since her skill is on a 12-second cooldown with 9 seconds initial SP. I can also see this being really good for CC, since fear doesn't really go off stats, or a better way to describe it, there's no resistance to it. This also brings up a different point, that her fear can be dodged. No. This means that she is really good for bosses. Except this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, him, what the f***, her, this thing, what the actual f***, and this thing. So if you wanna infinitely stall bosses like a Looney Tunes episode, then have fun. One thing that makes this skill powerful is, again, Necrosis. Not because it applies a massive amount of Necrosis, but it's just a really nice bonus of the skill since it works well with her overall kit. Especially that it increases her talent to 1, even though it can take quite a few hits for her to apply this effect, it still can. Overall, this skill as a whole is very powerful, the massive multiplier with a short cooldown that holds multiple charges, and have the ability to inflict Necrosis. Very cool. Her skill 3, Failure of Grit, is her only skill that does not inflict Necrosis. But fear not, because this skill does damage. Skill 3 provides her with a marksman sniper range with the buffs 220% attack, plus 60 attack speed, and multi-targeting, up to 2 targets. If the enemy she is attacking is under the effect of Necrosis, she will do elemental damage instead. Elemental damage on every single hit. Granted, this does mean that the enemy needs to be under the effect of Necrosis. Anyway, that's pretty much it about this skill. It's a massive offensive skill that converts her attack to elemental damage, bypassing defense and arch resist if the target is under the effect of Necrosis. Although this does mean that you are practically forced to bring a Ritualist or a Necrosis Inflictor. By that, I just mean bring Virtuosa. Who else are you going to bring? Logos? Now you have to get his module. His application isn't that good anyways. Even holes? Ha! Other difficulties, excluding the fact that she needs a partner all the time, is that her cooldown is pretty damn long. 55 seconds for this cooldown makes it really unspammable, although it just means that you probably need to plan more carefully with her. Her initial SP isn't bad though, so it isn't too annoying to set her up. Now, for her very busted modules, for her first maxed out module, her S2 explosion AoE will inflict fear on every single enemy. This is pretty much a must-have module since applying fear on everything on an AoE attack makes it a very easy application of fear, and it's very valuable. Her second module makes her skill 3 actually apply Necrosis. For some reason, she will apply 20% of her art damage as Necrosis. In my personal opinion, S3 was fine as just a DPS skill, but now it applies Necrosis, which makes it nuts. Not only that it helps herself for that elemental damage conversion, it also helps Ritualist apply Necrosis much quicker. Kind of a bust module. I don't know what HG was thinking. It's not like I'm a game developer. Wait a minute. Unless they didn't make it. That's right, it was me. I made it all up. Did I get you? No? You're lying. For her skill priority, you should eventually level both skill 2 and 3. Skill 1 is more of a if you like her or very niche playstyle, but other than that, her other two skills should take priority. Between these two, you should level skill 2 first, since it will probably be the skill that you'll use the most. Sure, skill 3 has massive offensive capabilities and strong against bosses, but it forces you to bring Virtuosa. Though skill 2 will still do really well in almost all contents and situation with its AoE and Fey ability. So in the end, should you pull her? Yes, you should pull her if you have Virtuosa, since she is her #1 fan. But should you pull her if you don't have Virtuosa? Still yes. One thing most people forget about is that Valakvin exists, and it's not a bad replacement for Virtuosa for Nymph. However, even if you don't have any Ritualist, I'd still say pull her. Her skill 2 is very universal and it doesn't really need a Ritualist for this. But now, the final question. Will I be pulling her? Absolutely not.
It's a piece of cake to bake a pretty cake. If the way is hazy, you gotta do the cooking by the book. You know you can't be lazy.
Hey, post-credit me here. If you have made it this far, thank you. And thank you for watching my propaganda video. I wanted to add this segment to slot in any extra things I have to say that doesn't distort any of the main content. In this video, I've only gone through how fear works briefly. I didn't really want to go into too much detail, but if you want to see a full guide on how fear actually works, then you can tell me. Submit a ticket for a 2% chance of me actually making it. After my PayPay banner propaganda video, I've gotten a few comments pointing out that I've missed a few more details about PayPay and such. And a few comments pointing out that my PayPay propaganda did not work. I'm kidding. I've always wanted to make these videos when I really got into Arknights, and I've always wanted to shine a positive light on newly released operators. Obviously, I'll be honest on their flaws and such. One thing that I want to mention is that if any of you wanted to write a Harvard essay or with 15 bibliography source references, I genuinely hope it happens. Not because I'm asking for negative engagement. I could also miss out details that can be very important to the operator. Special thanks to BlumTheam3468. They've pointed out a couple of my flaws, but this only drives me to improve on these type of videos. So if you want to state your statement about anything, don't be afraid to comment. Anyway, that'll be it. Also, again, thank you for watching, and I'm going to class now.